The first set of balance changes have just arrived in Pokemon Unite, and I could not be happier with the results. A bunch of the weakest and least used Pokemon have received buffs, and a couple of the most powerful Pokemon have been toned back, making space for all other Pokemon to shine, even if they did not get a buff in this patch. In this video, I'm going to be comparing all the changes that were listed in the patch notes from the old patch to the new patch that's now available today. Let's jump right in with two nerfs that I know you guys have been asking for. Gengar and Cinderace have been dialed back. Let's get it. Cinderace's base attack stat took a hit, which reduces all physical damage done by this Pokemon. By the way, Cinderace does only physical damage. At level 1, the boosted autos were doing 195 damage, and the non-boosted autos were doing 150. After this update, the boosted auto attacks are going to be doing 175 damage at level 1, and the non-boosted auto attacks will be doing 135. On top of Cinderace's base attack nerf, Blaze Kick also got a base damage nerf. It used to do 776 damage at level 7, and now it does 654. Cinderace's high skill cap dodging ability, Feint, now makes him invulnerable for 33% fewer frames. For the most skilled players, this change doesn't mean much, but for those of us who are barely dodging things with Feint, you're gonna have to switch to Flame Charge or just get good. Cinderace's Unite move did not receive a direct debuff, but it is doing less damage because of Cinderace's lowered base attack. The decrease in damage to Cinderace's Unite move is pretty insignificant. I just wanted to show that the decrease in base attack doesn't do much to individual attacks, but it hurts when you look at the overall bigger picture that Cinderace does a ton of small little attacks that all just got weaker. Pyro Ball really doesn't mesh with Cinderace's kit as well as the other choice, Blaze Kick, did, so they really had to buff this one to make it more usable. Even though Pyro Ball got a base damage increase and Blaze Kick got a base damage decrease, I still think that Blaze Kick is just too good for Cinderace to give up. Moving on to Gengar, the Pokemon I was most excited to play when this game first came out. During the Japanese beta, his Sludge Bomb Hex combo did not enough damage. When the game fully released, they made it do way too much damage. I like the way they went about fixing this. They reduced the damage of Hex by a little bit, which actually hurts a lot because your goal is to spam Hex over and over. So that small damage decrease actually has a big impact on the overall damage ceiling that his Sludge Bomb Hex combo can do. Another thing that was making Gengar way too hard to deal with was that every time Gengar hexed, he actually became invulnerable for a few frames. The number of invulnerability frames has been reduced. This change doesn't seem to be reflected in Gengar's animations as he looks exactly the same pre and post patch, but if we're to believe the patch notes, he is vulnerable during more frames when he's doing his Sludge Bomb Hex combo. So it's going to become easier to stun him out of this combo, and he's going to have to be comboing you longer because he's doing less damage. The Gengar changes don't end there. The projectile from Dream Eater now travels through the air much faster. On top of that, at level 7, Shadow Ball is doing twice as much damage as it was doing before. After this update, Shadow Ball now does about as much damage as Hex was doing in the old patch. Shadow Ball has a much longer cooldown and is single target, so it's way more fair for Shadow Ball to do this amount of damage. Honestly, they had it completely backwards when the game released. Shadow Ball Dream Eater is a single target combo that was doing less damage than Sludge Bomb Hex, which is an AoE combo. Because of this, Shadow Ball Dream Eater was probably the least used moveset in all of Pokemon Unite. I'm really excited to finally get some use out of this moveset and do the shenanigans that I've been waiting to do since the Japanese beta. We are not even close to being done talking about these patch notes, but I just need to mention two things. Number one, I stream Pokemon Unite over on Twitch, so if you want to see me try out this new patch and see what works and what doesn't work, then be sure to go check it out. And the second thing is that I had a big long conversation with my buddy Pingu Saint talking about where the meta was before this patch and where we think the meta is going to be headed after this patch. So if you want to hear more details on what we think is going to happen to the game after this balance update, then be sure to go check out that video. It's a pretty long one, so go ahead and run it in the background while you're trying out this new patch. Charizard was really hurting before, so I'm sure we're all happy to see our boy get a buff. His flamethrower now has a 1.5 second faster cooldown, and the burn now does a little bit more damage. Fire Punch does the same amount of damage as it did before, but it now knocks back opponents about twice as far. Fire Blast has a 3-second faster cooldown and applies a better slow to opponents it hits. It's real nice to see a lot of Charizard's options get better. We'll have to do some science and figure out what his best moveset is now. Talonflame got some pretty generous damage buffs. His starting move Acrobatics now does almost twice as much damage at level 1. Aerial Ace didn't get quite as much of a damage buff as Acrobatics, but it's still a damage buff and we take those. Fly does a pretty fat chunk of damage, and that amount of damage just got even fatter. I'm really excited to try this one to steal some objectives and force people to walk away from my team. After I have fun with Gengar's new moveset, I'm probably gonna give Talonflame a try, and I can't wait. Venusaur was another Pokemon that was kinda hurting. Sludge Bomb now does a decent chunk of extra damage, both on the initial hit and on each of the poison ticks. As you can see, the slow applied by Sludge Bomb also got a bit stronger. Solar Beam went from an 11-second cooldown all the way down to 10 seconds. I was honestly hoping for more, but I guess we'll take it. Venusaur's ultimate also got a damage buff. Again, this increase is a little bit underwhelming, but we do have to take into account the fact that you can activate Overgrowth to make this damage buff even more impactful. The patch notes say that Petal Dance got a move upgrade, and I can't figure out what that is. It does the same amount of damage, it lasts the same amount of time. The only thing I can think is maybe it makes you move a little bit faster, but you guys saw me run that side by side. I didn't see a difference, did you? Wigglytuff's Sing puts people to sleep just as fast as before and for just as long as before. The only difference is that while you're within the range of Sing but not yet asleep, you do move a bit slower. Double Slap got a nice little damage increase, and it's supposed to be making Pokemon move even slower than it did make them move before, but again, I don't really see that much of a difference. Wigglytuff still got a super nice buff in this patch. Her HP, defense, and special defense now scale way better, allowing her to function as a second frontline for your team much more effectively. Do you think Absol needed to do more damage? Neither do I, but apparently Timmy Studio disagrees. Two of Absol's moves now do significantly more damage. The only move that makes Absol invulnerable is their Unite move, so at least Absol is easier to deal with than the old Sludge Bomb Hex Gengar. Eldegoss's Cotton Guard now has a 2-second longer cooldown and heals a bit less. This is really going to impact Eldegoss's ability to sustain her team in longer fights. Cotton Spore has a 2.5 second shorter cooldown, grants Eldegoss a little bit more defense and special defense than before, and knocks opponents up ever so slightly longer than it did before. Zeraora's Wild Charge does a bit more damage than it did before, but it also got a 2.5 second longer cooldown. Zeraora's Unite move now does a bit less damage too. I don't really think these changes will mean much, but Zeraora is a very counterable Pokemon. His only invulnerability move is Wild Charge, which nobody really uses, and I don't think anyone will. So like Absol, I don't really think he's that hard to deal with. Cramorant's super amazing early game Whirlpool move got a little bit weaker, but also a little bit better. It does less damage overall, but the first few ticks actually do a bit more damage than they did before. Don't get me wrong, Whirlpool's damage did get nerfed, but it's just not all bad. Now Cramorant's Dive did get a straight buff. It does more damage than it was doing before. These changes aren't a huge win for Cramorant, but it's still a W for the derpy bird, especially if you were a user of the Dive Air Slash combo. Machamp's Close Combat was rarely being chosen over Cross Chop, so they gave it a damage buff. On top of that, Cross Chop got a damage debuff. Dashes are so valuable in MOBAs, so people are probably still going to keep choosing Cross Chop over Close Combat. You can now choose Close Combat instead and call it a buff and say that, hey, my damage got increased, but I think losing that dash is just worse, so people are going to stick with the dash and just run around with less damage than they had before. So in my eyes, this is just a nerf to Machamp, which is really sad because he was the only all-rounder that was standing up against the Lucario menace. Oh well, at least we have the Charizard buffs. There was a bug going on with Lucario that was kind of making him stronger, so we did kind of get nerfed because this bug is gone. Basically, during the charge up of Power Up Punch, Lucario's attack is going up, but that increased attack is only supposed to affect the Power Up Punch itself, not the attacks you do right afterward. The bug made it so that sometimes the attacks that you were doing right after Power-Up Punch, we're also getting that big attack buff. Feroki's basic attacks got a bug fix. I don't know what that means, but one of my friends told me that Feroki's basic attacks feel a lot smoother to use, so maybe it's a buff. If you've used Feroki a lot, then try him out for yourself and let me know if you think he actually did get a bit smoother with his basic attacks. Alolan Ninetales' Snow Warning ability got a bug fix as well. Some people thought that this would mean the ability would stop triggering on enemy Pokemon that Alolan Ninetales couldn't actually see because they were hiding in a bush, but as you can see here, I'm still getting hit by Snow Warning even when I'm hiding outside of Vulpix's vision. You should really listen to that discussion that Pingu Saint and I had about the meta shifts that are coming to the game. You'll probably learn something new. I know I did.